Commander James Ironside Reeves didn't trust civilians. Not with his life, not with his men, and especially not with the bleeding wound in his thigh that was slowly draining the color from his face. When the quiet nurse with the trembling hands approached his gurney with 4 equipment, he shoved her away so hard she stumbled backward into a crash cart. "Get away from me," he snarled through clenched teeth, his vision blurring at the edges. "Get me a real medic. Someone who's actually seen combat." The ER staff at County General Hospital exchanged knowing glances. Sarah Martinez was used to this treatment. For 6 months, she'd been the invisible one, the nurse who took the worst shifts, who cleaned up after everyone else, who never spoke unless spoken to. Dr. Preston Sterling called her the mouse behind her back. The other nurses called her worse things to her face. She had trembling hands. She flinched at loud noises. She avoided eye contact like it might kill her. What none of them knew was that Sarah Martinez had died 3 years ago in a firefight outside Sanjin, Afghanistan. The woman wearing her name tag and scrubs was someone else entirely. Someone the United States Marine Corps had spent $2 million training. Someone with a legend that could never be spoken aloud in polite company. Someone whose hands only trembled because they remembered the weight of dying men too young to vote. The commander was bleeding out, his face going from red to white to gray. And when Sarah rolled up her left sleeve to adjust the blood pressure cuff, his eyes went wide. Then wider. The tattoo on her inner forearm told a story that no civilian should know. A story that made a decorated war hero freeze mid-insult, his mouth hanging open, his pupils dilating with recognition, and something that looked a lot like fear. Because the woman he'd just shoved across the emergency room wasn't a nurse. She was a ghost. And ghosts don't stay buried forever. County General Hospital, Emergency Department. Saturday, 3:47 p.m. Sarah Martinez stood at the nurse's station, her eyes fixed on the computer screen, pretending not to hear the conversation happening 3 feet behind her. "I'm telling you, Sterling, she's a liability." Jessica Thorne, the head ER nurse, didn't bother lowering her voice. "She flinches every time an ambulance siren goes off. She takes 10 minutes to start in 4. And those hands, look at them. They shake like she's got Parkinson's." Dr. Preston Sterling leaned against the counter, his perfectly pressed white coat and Harvard Medical School pedigree giving him an air of untouchable authority. At 34, he was the youngest chief of emergency medicine County General had ever appointed. His father sat on the hospital board. His grandfather had a wing named after him. 6 months, Sterling said, flipping through a patient chart without really reading it. 6 months, and I haven't seen her do a single thing right. She's too slow. Too careful. Too. He waved his hand dismissively. Scared. Sarah's fingers continued typing, her face expressionless. She'd learned in Helmand Province that showing emotion was a luxury that could get people killed. The trembling in her hands increased slightly, a side effect of the nerve damage from holding a tourniquet on Lieutenant Morrison's femoral artery for 6 straight hours while they waited for evac. Morrison lived. Sarah's hands never fully recovered. "Why don't you fire her?" Jessica asked, examining her nails. "Hospital policy. Union protection. 6-month probation period just ended last week." Sterling's jaw tightened. "But I'm watching. One mistake. One patient complaint. One protocol violation. And she's gone." The automatic doors burst open with a hydraulic hiss that made Sarah's shoulders tense. 2 men in civilian clothes, dark tactical pants, plain black t-shirts, boots that cost more than most people's monthly rent, were supporting a third man between them. The injured man's face was pale, his right leg soaked in blood from mid-thigh to boot. "We need help," one of the men shouted, his voice carrying the specific kind of controlled urgency that came from training. "He's been bleeding for 20 minutes. Sarah was already moving, her body responding before her conscious mind caught up. Muscle memory. Pattern recognition. She grabbed a wheelchair, rolled it toward them, assessed the patient in 3 seconds flat. Male, late 40s, approximately 6'2", 200 pounds. Significant blood loss, estimated 800 to 1,000 milliliters based on clothing saturation and pallor. Deep laceration, right anterior thigh, likely penetrating injury. Arterial involvement possible. Blood pressure probably dropping. Needs immediate intervention. Trauma Bay 2, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Wheelchair now." The two support personnel exchanged glances, clearly military despite the civilian clothes. They lowered their commander into the wheelchair. Sarah began pushing, but the injured man, his name tag read Reeves J. Seymour, grabbed the armrest and twisted to look at her. "Who are you?" His words were slightly slurred, a sign of early shock. "Sarah Martinez, registered nurse. I'm going to take care of you." "No." Reeves's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength for someone who'd lost that much blood. "No civilians. I want a military doctor. Someone who understands combat injuries. Sir, you need immediate care. I gave you an order." Reeves's voice rose, sharp and commanding despite his weakening state. "Get me someone who knows what they're doing." Dr. Sterling appeared, drawn by the commotion, his expression shifting from annoyance to professional concern when he saw the blood. "What do we have?" "Thigh laceration, sir," one of the support personnel said. "Training accident." He was. "I wasn't talking to you." Sterling cut him off, addressing Sarah. "Martinez, status?" Sarah kept her eyes down, her voice soft. "Deep laceration, right thigh, significant blood loss. Needs trauma bay, pressure dressing, type and crossmatch, probable surgical consult." "I didn't ask for a textbook answer. Move." Sterling physically stepped in front of her, taking control of the wheelchair. "And get me Jessica or anyone actually useful." Sarah stepped back, her hands clasped in front of her, head down. Submissive. Obedient. Invisible. As Sterling wheeled Commander Reeves toward Trauma Bay 2, the patient's voice echoed back through the corridor. "Finally, someone who looks like they know what they're doing." Jessica Thorne appeared at Sarah's elbow. "You know what your problem is, Martinez? You look scared. Patients can smell fear. Sterling can smell it. Hell, everyone in this hospital can smell it." She smirked. "Maybe you should have stayed in whatever small-town clinic you came from." Sarah nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." "God, even your voice is pathetic." Jessica walked away, laughing. Sarah returned to the nurse's station, sat down at her computer, and continued her charting. Her hands were shaking worse now. She gripped them together under the desk, squeezing until the knuckles went white, using a technique a Navy psychiatrist had taught her for managing flashbacks. "Close your eyes. Count to 4. Remember you're safe. Remember you're home. Remember the war is over." Except the war was never really over. Not for people like her. It just moved locations, changed uniforms, found new ways to draw blood. Through the glass window of Trauma Bay 2, she could see Dr. Sterling examining Commander Reeves. The doctor's movements were confident, practiced. He cut away the blood-soaked pants, exposing a deep laceration that ran from mid-thigh to just above the knee. Sarah's eyes narrowed. From this distance, she could see what Sterling apparently couldn't, or didn't think was important enough to address immediately. The blood wasn't just flowing. It was pulsing. Subtle but there. Rhythmic. Bright red. Arterial compromise. Sarah's fingers twitched toward her phone. She should call someone. She should say something. But who would listen to the scared little nurse with the trembling hands? In Trauma Bay 2, Dr. Sterling was applying a pressure dressing, his focus entirely on the visible wound. Commander Reeves's two support personnel stood against the wall, their faces blank but their body language tense. They knew. Military guys always knew when something was wrong. The monitors began beeping. Blood pressure dropping. 110/70. Then 105/68. Sterling frowned, increased the 4 fluid rate, added a second bag. Probably just compensating for volume loss. "We'll run a type and cross, get him 2 units, and he'll be fine." But the monitors continued their slow descent. 100/65. Then 95/62. Sarah stood up. Sat back down. Stood up again. Her training screamed at her. Every instinct she'd honed over 4 combat tours told her exactly what was happening. The laceration had nicked the femoral artery. Not a complete transection, that would have killed him in minutes. But a partial tear, enough to create steady bleeding into the soft tissue of the thigh. A hidden hemorrhage. The kind that didn't show itself until it was almost too late. She took 2 steps toward Trauma Bay 2. Stopped. Turned back. What was she going to do? Interrupt the chief of emergency medicine? Tell a Harvard-trained surgeon that he was missing something? She was barely tolerated here as it was. One wrong move and she'd be out on the street, explaining to the VA counselor why she'd failed at yet another job. Sarah sat back down, pulled up Commander Reeves's digital chart, started filling in admission data. Name. Rank. Date of birth. Next of kin. Rank, Commander, United States Marine Corps. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. Marine Corps. She looked up at the trauma bay again. Commander Reeves's eyes were starting to glaze over, his face going from pale to gray. One of his support guys was arguing with Dr. Sterling now, pointing at the monitors, his voice rising. His BP is crashing, Doc. He needs more than a fucking pressure bandage. I'm aware of the situation, thank you, Sterling said coldly. Unless you have a medical degree I'm not aware of, please step back and let me work. The Marine's jaw clenched, but he stepped back. Military discipline overriding civilian concern. Sarah's hands were shaking worse now, but not from nerve damage. From rage. From the absolute crystal-clear knowledge that a Marine was dying 20 feet away from her, and she was sitting here doing nothing because she was too scared of losing a job she hated. The monitor alarm grew more insistent. 88/58. Dr. Sterling's confident expression flickered for the first time. Someone page vascular surgery. Now. Jessica Thorne grabbed the phone. Dr. Reynolds is in surgery. Won't be available for at least 45 minutes. Then page whoever's on call. Dr. Chun is at a conference in Denver. Dr. Okafor is on vacation. There's no one else. Sterling's face went pale. The supremely confident doctor suddenly looked very young and very out of his depth. Start vasopressors. Push fluids. We need to maintain pressure until... Until what? The Marine who'd been arguing stepped forward again. Until he bleeds out waiting for your specialist? Sarah Martinez stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the linoleum floor. Every head in the emergency department turned to look at her. The scared little nurse. The mouse. The one everyone had written off as too timid, too slow, too useless. She walked toward Trauma Bay 2. Dr. Sterling saw her approaching. Martinez, unless you're here with vascular surgery. Sir. Her voice was different now. Still quiet, but with an edge underneath it. Something that made the Marines straighten their posture unconsciously. Permission to assess the patient. What? No. Get back to your station. Sir. Sarah kept walking, her eyes locked on Commander Reeves's graying face. He has a femoral artery injury. Partial transection, likely from penetrating trauma. He's bleeding into his thigh. 15, maybe 20 minutes before he crashes completely. Sterling's mouth opened and closed. That's... How could you possibly? Because I've seen it before. Many times. Sarah reached the bedside. Up close, the signs were unmistakable. Thigh circumference increased by several inches. Tense, swollen. Skin slightly discolored. Classic compartment syndrome from internal hemorrhage. Commander Reeves's eyes focused on her with difficulty. His pupils were sluggish. You. Get away from me. I told you. No civilians. Sarah looked down at him. For the first time in 6 months, she made direct eye contact with a patient. Her brown eyes were steady, clear, absolutely without fear. Sir, she said quietly. With respect, you don't have time to wait for someone else. I gave you an order. I'm not one of your Marines, Commander. Sarah reached for his wrist to check his pulse. And you're dying. Reeves tried to push her hand away, his movements weak and uncoordinated. Sarah caught his wrist, held it gently but firmly. The motion made her left sleeve ride up slightly, exposing her inner forearm. Commander James Reeves's eyes went wide. Then wider. His mouth opened. No sound came out. The tattoo on Sarah's forearm was small, precise, rendered in black ink that had aged to a slightly blue-gray. It showed the eagle, globe, and anchor of the United States Marine Corps, but modified. Skeletal hands gripped the anchor. Death's head leered from above the eagle. And beneath it, in script so small it was almost illegible, a unit designation. MARSOC 2nd Battalion, 16 to 19. Below that, even smaller, leave no man behind. But it wasn't the tattoo itself that made Commander Reeves freeze. It was the scar tissue around it. Burns. Shrapnel. The kind of scarring that only came from being too close to something that exploded. His eyes tracked from the tattoo to Sarah's face. Really looking at her for the first time. Seeing past the slouched posture and trembling hands to the woman underneath. The way she held herself. The way she'd assessed his injury. The absolute lack of fear in her eyes. You. His voice came out as a whisper. You were 2nd Battalion. MARSOC. Sarah rolled her sleeve back down, her expression neutral. Was. Past tense. When? 2016 to 2019. 3 tours. Mostly Afghanistan, some Iraq. Commander Reeves's face went through a series of expressions. Shock, recognition, confusion, and finally something like a mixed with disbelief. 2nd Battalion. That's. You were in Sanjin. The firebase overrun. January 2018. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. Holy Christ. Reeves's head fell back against the pillow. You're one of the ghosts. Dr. Sterling was staring at both of them like they were speaking a foreign language. What are you talking about? Martinez, what is he? Sir, with respect, shut up. Sarah's voice was still quiet, but it carried absolute authority now. The kind of authority that made Dr. Preston Sterling, Harvard-educated, board-certified, chief of his department, close his mouth and step back. Sarah turned to Commander Reeves. Sir, I can fix this. But I need you to trust me. And I need everyone else to get out of my way. Reeves studied her face for a long moment. The monitors continued their alarming descent. 82 over 54. Then 78 over 51. Finally, he nodded once. Do it. What are you doing? Dr. Sterling found his voice. Martinez, you're a nurse, you can't. Doctor. One of the Marines stepped forward, his hand resting casually on Sterling's shoulder with just enough pressure to make it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Let her work. Sarah Martinez moved with purpose now, all traces of her trembling, submissive demeanor gone. This was a different person. The person she'd been before County General. Before the medical discharge. Before the nightmares that made her scream herself awake at 3 in the morning. Jessica. Sarah's voice cut through the shocked silence. I need the ultrasound machine. Now. Not in 5 minutes. Now. Jessica stood frozen, her mouth hanging open. Move. The command in Sarah's voice made the head nurse jump. She scrambled to pull the portable ultrasound unit closer to the bed. Sarah turned to the 2 Marines. One of you, apply pressure here. She indicated a specific point on Commander Reeves's upper thigh. Firm, steady, right over the femoral artery. Don't move. Don't adjust. Don't do anything except exactly what I tell you. The first Marine, his name was Corporal Davis, Sarah could see it on his tactical watch, moved immediately, placing his hands exactly where she'd indicated. Perfect pressure. Perfect positioning. He'd done this before. You. Sarah pointed to the 2nd Marine, Sergeant Holbrook. Find me a surgery kit. Sterile field kit, sutures, vascular clamps. This hospital should have a trauma cart somewhere. Go. Holbrook hesitated for half a second, looking at Sterling. The doctor stood paralyzed, his carefully constructed worldview collapsing around him. Now, Sergeant. Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. Holbrook ran. Sarah turned to Dr. Sterling. Sir, I need you to push 2 milligrams of midazolam. Commander Reeves needs conscious sedation. I'm going to have to explore this wound, and I'd rather he not feel all of it. Sterling's hands moved automatically toward the medication cart, years of training overriding his shock. This is insane. You can't perform surgery in an ER bay. You're a nurse, for God's sake. I've done this 57 times. Sarah was pulling on sterile gloves now, her hands perfectly steady. Not a tremor. Not a shake. 14 times under direct fire. Twice in the back of a Humvee doing 60 miles an hour through Kandahar. Once in a helicopter that was actively being shot down. So yes, doctor, I think I can handle it in a nice, clean, quiet American emergency room. She met Sterling's eyes for the first time in 6 months. He flinched at what he saw there. Not fear. Not submission. Something cold and hard and absolutely certain. Sterling pushed the midazolam. Commander Reeves's eyes started to flutter. Sarah leaned over him. Sir, you're going to feel some pressure and tugging. Don't move. Don't fight me. This is going to hurt, but I need you to stay still. Understood. Reeves nodded weakly. Do it. Sergeant Holbrook returned with a surgical kit. Sarah tore it open, laid out instruments with practiced efficiency. Scalpel. Hemostat clamps. Suture kit. Sterile drapes. This is insane, Jessica whispered to no one in particular. She's going to kill him. No, Corporal Davis said quietly, his hands still applying pressure. She's going to save him. I've heard stories about the medics in 2nd Battalion. They're legends. They do things that shouldn't be medically possible. Sarah ignored them all. She was in the zone now, the place where nothing existed except the patient, the injury, and the step-by-step process to fix it. The same place she'd gone in Sanjin when the firebase was being overrun, when half her team was down, when mortar rounds were falling every 20 seconds and she had 4 men bleeding out simultaneously. She used the ultrasound probe to map the injury. There the femoral artery, visible as a dark line on the screen. And there the tear, a small irregularity in the vessel wall. Blood pooling around it. The thigh had swollen to nearly twice its normal size from internal hemorrhage. Found it. Sarah spoke calmly, clinically. Partial tear, anterior wall of the femoral artery, approximately 2 centimeters below the inguinal ligament. I can repair it. You can repair it? Sterling's voice was high, strained. You're talking about vascular surgery. That requires a steady hand, knowledge of anatomy, and about 15 minutes if you know what you're doing. Sarah picked up the scalpel. Everyone who's not essential, step back. Corporal Davis, maintain pressure until I tell you otherwise. Yes, ma'am. Sarah made the first incision. Dr. Sterling actually gasped. The cut was perfect, precise, confident, exactly the right depth. Sarah extended it, opening the wound enough to visualize the damaged artery. Blood welled up immediately. Sarah had anticipated this. Her left hand had a suction catheter ready, clearing the field while her right hand isolated the artery with a hemostat clamp. Davis, release pressure. Now. The corporal pulled his hands away. Blood spurted from the arterial tear, a bright red fountain that would have panicked most people. Sarah calmly clamped above and below the tear, stopping the flow in less than 3 seconds. The monitor alarms stopped screaming. Blood pressure stabilized at 75/48. Low, but not dropping anymore. Vascular suture, 5-0 proline. Sarah held out her hand. Jessica, moving on autopilot now, placed the suture in Sarah's palm. What happened next would later be described by everyone present as something close to supernatural. Sarah Martinez, the scared little nurse with the trembling hands, performed a vascular repair that would have challenged most trained surgeons. Her hands moved with absolute precision, placing sutures so perfectly that they looked machine-made. Each stitch was identical. Each knot was perfect. She worked in complete silence, her breathing slow and steady, her focus absolute. 6 minutes passed. 7. 8. Finally, Sarah tied off the last suture. She released the clamps. Blood flowed through the repaired artery, smooth and regular. No leaks. No pulsing. Perfect. Check the distal pulse, she said quietly. Sergeant Holbrook, who had been watching with his mouth open, pressed his fingers to Commander Reeves's foot. It's there. It's strong. Sarah nodded. She began closing the outer incision, her movements efficient and methodical. Pulse ox is climbing. Blood pressure stabilizing. He'll need blood replacement, probably 3 units. Run another liter of lactated ringers. Start a broad-spectrum antibiotic. Watch for compartment syndrome over the next 12 hours. She finished the last suture, stepped back, and stripped off her gloves. The entire procedure had taken 14 minutes. Commander Reeves, foggy from the sedation but conscious, stared at her with something close to reverence. You really are one of them. The Sanjin ghosts. Sarah didn't respond. She turned to Dr. Sterling. Sir, patient is stable. He'll need ICU admission for monitoring. I've documented the procedure. You can review my notes. Sterling looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His eyes moved from Sarah to the perfectly sutured repair to the stabilizing monitors. That was... I've never seen. Where did you learn? In places where you don't get a second chance. Sarah's voice was flat now, emotionless. The brief glimpse of the warrior beneath the nurse's uniform was fading, replaced by the submissive mask she'd worn for 6 months. Permission to return to my station, sir. Martinez. Sterling's voice trailed off. He had no idea what to say. Nothing in his Harvard education or his privileged upbringing had prepared him for what he'd just witnessed. Permission to return to my station, Sarah repeated, her eyes down again, her shoulders hunched. Granted. Sarah walked out of Trauma Bay 2. As she passed the nurse's station, every eye in the emergency department followed her. The whispers started before she even sat down. Did you see that? She just did a vascular repair. In an ER bay. In 14 minutes. Who the hell is she? Jessica Thorne approached slowly, her earlier smugness replaced by something like awe. Martinez. That was... I don't even know what that was. Sarah pulled up Commander Reeves's chart on her computer, her hands shaking again now that the adrenaline was fading. Just doing my job, ma'am. That wasn't a job. That was... Jessica struggled for words. Are you really military? Is what he said true? Was military. Past tense. But... Ma'am, with respect, I have charting to complete. Sarah's voice was back to its usual whisper. The warrior had retreated. The mouse had returned. Jessica walked away, shaking her head. In Trauma Bay 2, Commander Reeves was being prepared for transfer to the ICU. Corporal Davis and Sergeant Holbrook stood on either side of his gurney, their expressions unreadable. Gunny, Davis said quietly. Should we? Not yet. Holbrook's eyes were locked on Sarah's hunched figure at the nurse's station. But we're going to find out exactly who she is. And we're going to report this. Davis nodded. Command needs to know. If she's really 2nd Battalion. She is. Commander Reeves's voice was weak but certain. I saw her tattoo. I saw her work. That's not something you can fake. She's real. Then why is she here? Davis asked. Why is she working as a nurse in some random civilian hospital, letting people treat her like garbage? Reeves closed his eyes. Everyone comes home from war with damage. Most of it you can't see. He opened his eyes again, looked at Sarah through the glass. She's running. Hiding. Trying to be someone she's not. Should we leave her alone? Holbrook asked. Hell no. Reeves's grip on the gurney rail tightened. That woman just saved my life. More than that, she's one of ours. Marines don't abandon Marines. Even the ghosts. What do you want us to do? Reeves thought for a moment, his mind clearing as the sedation wore off. Call Colonel Sharp at Pendleton. Give him my authorization code. Tell him we need a full background on a former MARSOC medic, likely medical discharge, currently working at County General Hospital under the name Sarah Martinez. Tell him. Reeves paused, choosing his words carefully. Tell him one of the Sanjin ghosts is alive. And she needs help. The next 3 hours passed in strange, tense calm. Commander Reeves was transferred to the ICU, his condition stable and improving. Sarah returned to her normal duties, checking vitals, changing 4 bags, cleaning bedpans. The work that everyone else avoided. But the atmosphere in the emergency department had changed. The other nurses watched her differently now. Not with mockery, but with confusion and something approaching fear. The scared little mouse had revealed claws. Nobody quite knew what to do with that information. Dr. Sterling disappeared into his office immediately after Commander Reeves's transfer. Through the glass door, Sarah could see him on the phone, his expression grave. He was making call after call. Each conversation seemed to make him more agitated. At 6:47 p.m., Sarah's hospital pager beeped. Report to administration immediately. She knew what this meant. She'd known at the moment she'd picked up that scalpel. But she'd made her choice. A Marine was dying, and she'd taken an oath a long time ago. An oath that didn't expire just because the uniform came off. Sarah walked to the administration wing on the second floor, her movements slow and mechanical. The trembling in her hands was worse now. Not from nerve damage. From the absolute certainty of what was coming. The conference room held 5 people, Dr. Sterling, Jessica Thorne, 2 hospital administrators she'd never met, and a security guard. The head administrator, a thin, severe-looking woman named Patricia Hendricks, gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Ms. Martinez." Sarah sat, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes down. "Do you know why you're here?" Hendricks asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Explain it to me." "I performed an unauthorized medical procedure. I exceeded my scope of practice as a registered nurse. I violated hospital protocol and potentially exposed the hospital to liability." Hendricks nodded slowly. "Dr. Sterling has filed a formal complaint. He states that you physically intimidated him, commandeered his patient, and performed major surgery without physician supervision or approval." Sarah didn't respond. What could she say? Everything stated was technically true. "He also states," Hendricks continued, "that you saved a patient's life when no physician was available to do so. That your procedure was technically perfect. That the patient is now stable and recovering." She paused. "He seems conflicted about what happened." "Yes, ma'am." "Ms. Martinez." Hendricks leaned forward. "Your personnel file is remarkably thin. Employment history going back 3 years. Before that, nothing. Your nursing license was issued 3 years ago. Before that, you don't appear to exist in any system I can access." Sarah's jaw tightened slightly. "Ma'am, my records." "Your records are sealed." Hendricks cut her off. "Federal seal. The kind of seal that appears when someone has been involved in classified military operations." She slid a folder across the table. "I made some calls. Very discreet calls. To people who don't usually take calls from hospital administrators." Sarah didn't open the folder. She didn't need to. She knew what it said. Or more accurately, what it didn't say. Every detail of her service would be redacted. Blacked out. Classified. "I don't know what you did," Hendricks said quietly. "I don't know where you served or what you saw. But I do know that you violated hospital policy. You performed a procedure you were not authorized to perform. And regardless of the outcome, I cannot allow that to stand." Here it comes, Sarah thought. The end. Again. "Ms. Martinez." Hendricks stood up. "You are suspended without pay, pending a full investigation. You will surrender your badge and your access cards. You are not to enter hospital property until this matter is resolved." Sarah nodded slowly. She'd expected this. Welcomed it, even. Being invisible was exhausting. Being a mouse when you'd been trained as a wolf was its own special kind of torture. She stood, removed her badge from the lanyard around her neck, placed it on the table. "Yes, ma'am. Is there anything else?" "Yes." Dr. Sterling spoke for the first time. His voice was different now, less arrogant, more uncertain. "Where did you really learn to do that? That wasn't nursing school. That wasn't something you picked up from a textbook." Sarah met his eyes. For a moment, she considered telling him. Explaining. Making him understand. But what was the point? People like Sterling lived in a world where the worst emergency was a code blue. Where danger meant a lawsuit. Where death was a bureaucratic problem to be managed with the right forms and procedures. He'd never understand Sanjin. The fire base. The night the perimeter was breached and 40 enemy combatants poured through the wire while she operated on 3 men simultaneously by flashlight. The sound of mortar rounds. The smell of burning flesh. The weight of a dying 19-year-old lance corporal who kept apologizing for bleeding on her because his mother had taught him to be polite. "I learned it on the job, doctor." Sarah's voice was flat. "That's all you need to know." She turned and walked out of the conference room. The security guard followed her to the locker room, watching as she gathered her belongings. There wasn't much. A change of clothes. A photo in her locker, 4 Marines in desert camouflage, grinning at the camera, their arms around each other's shoulders. Only one of them was still alive. Sarah touched the photo gently, then closed her locker door. She'd known this job wouldn't last. They never did. Every time she tried to go back to normal, something would happen. Some emergency would trigger her training, and the ghost would surface, and then it would all fall apart again. The VA counselor had warned her about this. "You can't just turn it off," Dr. Reynolds had said during their last session. "You spent 4 years in the most intense combat environment imaginable. Your brain was rewired for survival. You can't expect to flip a switch and become a civilian again." But Sarah kept trying. Kept hoping that somewhere, somehow, she could find a place where the past stayed buried and the trembling in her hands was just nerve damage and not the physical manifestation of survivor's guilt. She walked out of County General Hospital at 7:23 p.m., carrying her small box of belongings, her shoulders hunched against the evening chill. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her too much of tracers in the dark. Sarah started walking toward the bus stop. Her car had died 2 months ago, and she hadn't had the money to fix it. The bus would take an hour to get back to her studio apartment. Another hour to sit in the dark and remember why she kept failing at this whole normal life thing. Behind her, in the ICU, Commander James Reeves had regained full consciousness. The sedation had worn off, and his mind was clear. The first thing he did was grab his phone from the bedside table. The second thing he did was make a call. "Colonel Sharp." Reeves's voice was stronger now, fueled by conviction. "This is Commander James Reeves, authorization code Alpha 7 Delta 3. I need to invoke Priority Medical Response Protocol. I have a former MARSOC combat medic who saved my life approximately 3 hours ago. She's been suspended from her job for doing so. I'm requesting immediate intervention." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yes, sir," Reeves continued. "I understand the protocol is rarely used. But this is exactly what it's designed for. One of our own is in trouble. And we don't leave Marines behind. Ever." Another pause. "Her name is Sarah Martinez. Cover name, probably. I haven't been able to confirm her real identity, but she has a MARSOC 2nd Battalion tattoo, 2016 to 2019. She mentioned Sanjin, the fire base." Reeves's voice dropped. "Sir, I think she's one of the ghosts. The ones from the January 2018 operation." The pause lasted longer this time. "Yes, sir." Reeves's grip on the phone tightened. "I know what I'm saying. I know what that means. That's why I'm calling. If she's really one of them, she's been missing for 3 years. Living under a false identity. Working as a civilian nurse while people who don't deserve to breathe the same air as her treat her like garbage." His voice hardened. "Sir, we owe her. All of us. Every Marine who came home because of what those medics did, we owe them. So I'm requesting that we pay that debt. Now." A longer pause. Then Reeves nodded, even though the person on the other end couldn't see him. "Yes, sir. County General Hospital. I'll wait here. And sir." Reeves looked out the window at the darkening sky. "Thank you." He ended the call and lay back against his pillows, exhausted but satisfied. What Sarah Martinez didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the Marine Corps takes care of its own. Even the ghosts. Especially the ghosts. The wheels were in motion now. And they would not stop until the situation was resolved. One way or another. Sarah Martinez stood at the bus stop, her cardboard box tucked under one arm, watching the traffic flow past. The evening was cold enough that she could see her breath, but she didn't notice. Her mind was elsewhere. Specifically, it was in Sanjin, Afghanistan, January 15, 2018, 0347 hours. The flashback hit her like it always did, sudden, overwhelming, inescapable. One moment she was standing at a bus stop in suburban America. The next moment she was back in the firebase medical tent, her hands buried in Lieutenant Morrison's thigh, feeling for the severed artery while mortar rounds shook the earth and automatic weapon fire stitched the darkness outside. "Stay with me, LT." Her voice in the memory was calm, steady, even though her hands were covered in blood up to the elbows. I've got you. You're going home. I promise. Morrison's face was white, his lips blue. Can't feel my leg, document. Can't feel anything. That's the shock. That's good. Means you're not feeling the pain. Sarah found the artery, clamped it with a hemostat. Blood flow stopped. There we go. Got it. You're going to be fine. Outside, someone screamed. The sound of an RPG impact. The canvas wall of the medical tent rippled from the blast wave. Document. Morrison's hand grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Doc, you need to go. Help the others. I'm done. I can feel it. Bullshit, Lieutenant. You're going home. That's an order from medical staff, which supersedes your rank, sir, so shut up and let me work. A weak laugh from Morrison. You're insane, you know that? Yes, sir. It's in my personnel file. The memory dissolved. Sarah found herself on her knees at the bus stop, her cardboard box spilled across the sidewalk, tears streaming down her face. She was shaking violently, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder. The official diagnosis that had gotten her medically discharged. The reason she couldn't go back. The reason she was here, at a bus stop, crying over a job that had never really been a job at all, just another failed attempt to pretend the past didn't exist. Sarah gathered her belongings back into the box with trembling hands. The bus arrived. She didn't get on. She couldn't. Not like this. Not while the flashback still had its claws in her. She started walking instead. No destination. Just movement. Putting one foot in front of the other. The same technique that had gotten her through 4 tours, through the medical discharge, through the last 3 years of trying and failing to be normal. She walked for 45 minutes, through downtown, past closed shops and busy restaurants, through parks where children played and people walked dogs. Normal people living normal lives. People who'd never held someone's intestines inside their body cavity while calling for evac. People who'd never had to choose which patient lived and which one died because there simply wasn't enough time or blood or supplies to save everyone. Sarah found herself at a small park with a memorial to fallen soldiers. She sat on a bench facing the monument, her box beside her, and stared at the names carved in granite. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Each one representing a life cut short. A family destroyed. A future erased. Some of those names she knew personally. Lance Corporal Chun. Private First Class Rodriguez. Sergeant Miller. Her hands had been the last thing they'd felt. Her voice had been the last thing they'd heard. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered to the monument. I'm so sorry I couldn't save all of you. The granite offered no response. It never did. Sarah was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't hear the sound at first. By the time it registered, a low rhythmic thumping that made the bench vibrate beneath her, it was almost overhead. She looked up. 2 helicopters. Not civilian news choppers or medical evac birds. Military helicopters. CH-53E Super Stallions, to be specific. The Marine Corps' heavy-lift birds. Massive, powerful, and absolutely unmistakable. Sarah's heart stopped. The helicopters descended toward the park's large open field, their rotors creating a windstorm that bent trees and sent fallen leaves swirling in massive spirals. People screamed and ran. Car alarms went off. A police siren started wailing somewhere in the distance. Sarah stood up slowly, her box forgotten, her eyes locked on the descending aircraft. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. It had to be another flashback. Some new variation her traumatized brain had conjured up to torture her. But the wind was real. The sound was real. And when the first helicopter touched down with a massive thump that she felt in her chest, she knew this was actually happening. The rear ramp of the lead helicopter dropped. 6 Marines in full combat gear emerged at a run, desert digital camouflage, tactical vests, M4 carbines held at low ready. They moved with the coordinated precision of special operations personnel. The lead Marine was a master sergeant, based on his rank insignia. He was carrying a tablet, and his eyes swept the park with tactical awareness until they locked onto Sarah. You. He pointed at her. Are you Sarah Martinez? Sarah's voice didn't work. She nodded. The master sergeant covered the distance between them in seconds. He stopped 3 feet away, his expression unreadable behind military-grade sunglasses. "Ma'am, I'm Master Sergeant Kyle Brennan, Marine Special Operations Command. I need to see your left forearm." This was insane. This was impossible. Sarah stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. "Ma'am." Brennan's voice was firm but not unkind. "Your forearm. Please." Moving on autopilot, Sarah rolled up her left sleeve, exposing the tattoo. Brennan looked at it. Looked at his tablet. Looked back at her face. His expression shifted, professional distance giving way to something like awe. "Holy shit," he breathed. "It's really you. You're really alive." What?" Sarah's voice came out as a rasp. Brennan turned to his team. "Confirmed. We have Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Doc Mitchell. Repeat, Doc Mitchell is alive and located." He spoke into his radio, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Havoc 6 to command. Asset secured. Initiating extraction protocol." "Wait." Sarah found her voice. "What are you talking about? I'm not. My name is Sarah Martinez, I'm not." "Ma'am, with respect, yes you are." Brennan pulled up something on his tablet, turned it to show her. "Your real name is Sarah Mitchell. Gunnery Sergeant, United States Marine Corps. MARSOC 2nd Battalion. Medical discharge in 2020, classified circumstances. You've been missing for 3 years. Presumed dead by most people. Living under a false identity." Sarah stared at the screen. At her own face, younger and harder, in a military photo. At her real name. At a service record that was mostly blacked out but showed enough to make her knees weak. "How did you find me?" she whispered. "Commander James Reeves. You saved his life today. He called it in." Brennan put the tablet away. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us. Now." "I can't. I'm suspended from work. I have to." "Ma'am." Brennan's voice was gentle now. "You don't understand. You're not in trouble. You're being recalled to active duty. Emergency authorization from MARSOC Command. There's a situation that requires your specific skill set." Sarah's mind reeled. "What situation? I'm not even active anymore. I was discharged." "Discharged on medical grounds, yes. PTSD. But your medical clearance was never permanently revoked. It was suspended pending psychiatric evaluation. An evaluation you never completed because you disappeared into the civilian world under a fake name." I didn't." "Ma'am, we don't have time for this conversation here." Brennan gestured to the second helicopter, which had also landed. Marines were forming a perimeter around it, keeping curious onlookers back. "There's a critically injured Marine at Camp Pendleton who specifically requested you. He's got about 90 minutes before brain damage becomes irreversible. You're the only person within 300 miles with the training to help him." Sarah felt like the ground was tilting under her feet. Who requested me?" Brennan consulted his tablet. "Sergeant First Class Marcus Torres. Says he knows you from San Jin. Says you saved his life during the firebase overrun. Says you're the only person he trusts to operate on him." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Torres. The kid with the shrapnel in his spine. The one she'd operated on for 3 hours straight while the firebase burned around them. The one who'd been paralyzed from the waist down until she'd done the impossible and removed fragments that were supposedly irretrievable. "Torres is here? In California?" "Yes, ma'am. Training accident. Severe neck trauma. The doctors at Pendleton can't stabilize him. His airway is compromised. He's refusing to let anyone operate until you arrive." Sarah's professional instincts kicked in despite her shock. "Neck trauma? What kind? Penetrating? Blunt force?" "Penetrating. Fragment from a training explosive. Lodged near his carotid artery. The surgeons are afraid to touch it." "But I'm not a surgeon. I'm just a medic. I don't have the credentials." "Ma'am." Brennan stepped closer, lowering his voice. 3 years ago, in San Jin, you performed 19 successful surgeries in 12 hours. Under fire. With inadequate supplies. while the base was being overrun by enemy combatants. You saved 47 lives that night. 47 Marines who are alive today because of you. He paused. You're not just a medic. You're a legend. You're one of the ghosts. And right now, Sergeant Torres needs his ghost. Sarah looked at the helicopters. At the Marines waiting for her. At the impossible situation unfolding around her. 3 years ago, she'd run from this. From the uniforms, the responsibility, the weight of life and death in her hands. She tried to be small, invisible, safe. A mouse hiding from the world. But mice couldn't save lives. Ghosts could. Sarah took a deep breath. Let it out slowly. When she spoke, her voice was different. Stronger. The voice of Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, not Sarah Martinez, the scared nurse. What's my timeline? Brennan checked his watch. Wheels up in 3 minutes. Flight time to Pendleton is 40 minutes. That gives us just over an hour to prep once we arrive. Not enough time for a full surgical setup. We'll need to work with what's available. Do we have imaging? CT scans? MRI? Everything. It's all waiting for you. Sarah nodded once. Decisive. Then let's move. And someone needs to call ahead. I'll need specific equipment. I'll give you the list in the air. She started walking toward the lead helicopter. Behind her, her cardboard box sat forgotten on the park bench, its contents scattered in the wind from the rotors. The scared nurse was gone. The mouse had vanished. In their place was someone else entirely. Someone who died 3 years ago in Afghanistan but was apparently still needed. The ghost was back. The interior of the CH-53E Super Stallion was exactly as Sarah remembered. All business, no comfort, designed to move Marines and equipment quickly and efficiently. She strapped into a seat, accepted a headset from one of the crew chiefs, and immediately began giving orders. I need you to contact Pendleton's trauma surgery department, she said into the mic, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone used to managing chaos. Tell them I need the following: a portable C-arm fluoroscopy unit, vascular microinstruments, 4-0 and 5-0 proline suture, specifically the CV3 needle if they have it. Tell them to prep an ore, doesn't matter which one, but I want it cold. 68 degrees maximum. And I need at least 4 units of O-negative blood standing by. Master Sergeant Brennan was relaying her requirements into his radio. Copy that. Anything else? Yes. Who's the attending surgeon on call? Brennan checked his tablet. Commander Nancy Okafor. Vascular specialist. Sarah nodded. Good. I've heard of her. Tell her I'm not here to replace her, I'm here to assist. This is her hospital, her rules. I'm just the specialist she called for Torres's specific injury. Ma'am, I think she already knows that. She's the one who approved your emergency recall. That surprised Sarah. She did. Yes, ma'am. Apparently Commander Reeves called her directly after you saved his life. Explained what happened. She made some calls, pulled some strings, and here we are. The helicopter banked sharply, heading south. Through the open side door, Sarah could see the California coastline passing below, the setting sun turning the ocean into liquid gold. For 3 years, she tried to forget this feeling, the rush of being needed, being essential, being the person who made the impossible happen. She told herself it was better to be safe and invisible than powerful and exposed. She'd been wrong. ETA 28 minutes, the pilot's voice crackled over the headset. Pendleton is clearing airspace now. Sarah closed her eyes, visualizing the procedure. Neck trauma. Fragment near the carotid artery. High risk of catastrophic hemorrhage. She'd done this before, but never under ideal circumstances. Always in the field, always under pressure, always with insufficient equipment. This time would be different. This time she'd have real tools, real support. This time she could do it right. Ma'am. One of the Marines, a young corporal who couldn't be more than 22, was watching her with barely concealed awe. Is it true what they say about Sanjin? Sarah opened her eyes. That depends on what they say. That you operated on 19 guys in one night. That you saved almost everyone even though the base was being overrun. That you, he hesitated. That you're one of the ghosts. Sarah studied the young Marine's face. He reminded her of so many others. Too young, too eager, too innocent for the kind of war they were sending him to fight. What's your name, Corporal? Miller, ma'am. Corporal David Miller. Are you deploying soon, Miller? Yes, ma'am. 8 weeks. Sarah leaned forward slightly. Then let me tell you something true about Sanjin. About that night. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Yes, I operated on 19 Marines. Yes, we saved most of them. But the reason it worked wasn't because I was some kind of superhero. It was because I had a team. 4 other medics working with me. Corpsmen from Navy. PJs from Air Force. We worked together. We trusted each other. And we refused to quit. But you were the lead surgeon. I was the medic who happened to have the most experience with penetrating trauma. That's all. The others were just as skilled, just as brave, just as committed. Sarah's voice hardened slightly. There are no ghosts, Corporal. There are just Marines who do their jobs under terrible circumstances. The ones who survive get turned into legends. The ones who don't get forgotten. Neither version is true. Miller nodded slowly, absorbing this. Yes, ma'am. But, Sarah added, her voice softening, if you do deploy, and if you do find yourself in a situation where someone's life depends on you doing something you're not sure you can do, remember this, you can. You will. Because that's what Marines do. We find a way. Aura, ma'am. The helicopter began its descent. Through the open door, Sarah could see Camp Pendleton's massive military complex spreading out below them. Thousands of buildings. Training facilities. The headquarters of Marine Corps Western Operations. And somewhere down there, a young Marine was dying. Waiting for her. Believing she could save him like she'd saved him before. Sarah refused to let him down. The helicopter touched down on a marked LZ near the base hospital. A team of medical personnel was waiting. 2 surgeons in scrubs, 3 nurses, a physician's assistant. Commander Nancy Okafor was immediately identifiable. A tall, elegant woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from decades of experience. Sarah jumped out of the helicopter before it had fully powered down, ducking under the rotors and jogging toward the medical team. Master Sergeant Brennan and 2 of his Marines followed. Commander Okafor. Sarah extended her hand. Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Mitchell. Thank you for authorizing this. Okafor shook her hand firmly, studying Sarah's face with open curiosity. You're younger than I expected. And you look exhausted. Long day, ma'am. What's the patient's status? Unstable. Airways compromised. We've got him on high-flow oxygen, but he's decompensating. BP is dropping. The fragment is lodged between his carotid artery and his trachea. Every time he moves or coughs, it shifts slightly. We're afraid if we try to intubate him, we'll dislodge it completely and he'll bleed out. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. Did he ask for me specifically? He did. Refused to let anyone touch him until you arrived. Keep saying Doc will know what to do. Okafor's expression was frank. I'll be honest, Sergeant. I'm not entirely comfortable with this. Your service record is impressive, but you're not board certified. You don't have surgical privileges. And you've been out of active duty for 3 years. I understand your concerns, ma'am. They're valid. However, Okafor continued, I also understand that you've performed procedures under combat conditions that would challenge most trained surgeons. And more importantly, the patient trusts you. In a situation like this, that trust might be the difference between him cooperating and him panicking. So here's what I'm proposing. I'm the attending surgeon. You're my specialist consultant. We work together. You lead on the actual extraction. I provide oversight and backup. Acceptable. Sarah felt a wave of relief. Okafor was being professional, respectful, and smart. More than acceptable, ma'am. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Let's see if we can actually save this kid. Okafor turned and started walking briskly toward the hospital. Or 3 is prepped. We have everything you requested plus some additional equipment I thought might be useful. Your patient is in pre-op holding. He's been sedated but not anesthetized, We were waiting for you. They entered the hospital through a side entrance reserved for emergency cases. Sarah was vaguely aware of people staring at her. She was still in her civilian clothes, still technically a suspended ER nurse, now somehow walking through a military hospital as if she belonged there. But she did belong there. That was the strange truth she'd been avoiding for 3 years. This wasn't just familiar, it was home. The pre-op holding area was a small room with monitoring equipment and an adjustable bed. Sergeant First Class Marcus Torres lay propped up at 45 degrees, his neck immobilized in a soft collar, his eyes glazed from sedation but aware. When Sarah entered the room, his eyes focused on her. Recognition sparked. His lips moved, forming words around the oxygen mask. Document. You came. Sarah approached the bed, her manner calm and professional. Of course I came, Torres. I heard you were causing trouble again. A weak smile. Can't help it, document. It's my specialty. Sarah examined the wound without touching it. A small puncture on the left side of his neck, directly over the carotid artery. Minimal external bleeding, which meant the fragment was likely acting as a plug. But his voice was hoarse, strained. The fragment was also compressing his trachea. Tell me what happened, she said. Training exercise. Demolitions. Something went wrong. Fragment from the charge hit me. Torres's breathing was labored. Doc, I can't. It's hard to breathe. Getting worse. I know. We're going to fix it. Sarah looked at Commander Okafor. Ma'am, we need to move now. His airway is compromising. If we wait much longer, we'll lose the option of controlled extraction. Okafor nodded crisply. Or 3. Let's go. The surgical suite was exactly what Sarah needed. Cool, bright, sterile, with every piece of equipment positioned perfectly. A surgical team was already scrubbed and waiting. 2 nurses, an anesthesiologist, and a surgical tech. Sarah scrubbed in next to Commander Okafor, the familiar ritual of soap and water and methodical cleaning bringing a strange sense of peace. This, she realized, was where she was supposed to be. Not hiding in a civilian ER, pretending to be someone she wasn't. Here. In the OR. Where life and death were decided by skill and knowledge and the refusal to give up. Ready when you are, Sergeant, Okafor said. Sarah nodded. They entered the OR together. Sergeant Torres had been anesthetized now, intubated carefully by an expert anesthesiologist who'd managed to thread the tube past the fragment without dislodging it. He was stable for the moment, but Sarah could see on the monitors that his oxygen saturation was marginal. They didn't have much time. C-arm in position? Sarah asked. Ready, the surgical tech confirmed. Sarah stepped up to the operating table. Commander Okafor positioned herself across from her, ready to assist. The nurses and tech waited for instructions. For a moment, Sarah felt the familiar pre-surgery anxiety, the awareness that another human life was literally in her hands, that every decision for the next hour would have permanent consequences. Then she took a breath. Let it out. Felt the anxiety fade, replaced by clinical focus. Scalpel, she said. The surgery that followed would later be described in medical journals as a masterclass in trauma management. Sarah made her incision with absolute precision, carefully exposing the carotid artery and the embedded fragment. Using the C-arm fluoroscopy to visualize the fragment's exact position, she identified the safest extraction angle. The fragment was shaped like a tiny arrowhead, its tip less than a millimeter from the carotid's arterial wall. One wrong move, one tremor, one moment of hesitation, and it would pierce through. Torres would bleed out in seconds. Sarah's hands were rock steady. Not a tremor. Not a shake. She used a combination of instruments, fine forceps, a microsuction catheter, and careful patient maneuvering, to slowly rotate the fragment away from the artery. Millimeter by millimeter. Degree by degree. 20 minutes passed. 30. 40. Nobody in the OR spoke. The only sounds were the rhythmic beeping of the monitors and the hiss of the ventilator. At the 43-minute mark, Sarah felt the fragment come free. She lifted it out in one smooth motion, immediately placing a vascular clamp on the small puncture in the artery wall. Got it, she said quietly. Commander, I need you to hold this clamp while I repair the vessel. Okafor moved in smoothly, taking over the clamp. Sarah worked quickly now, suturing the arterial puncture with microsutures that were barely visible to the naked eye. 8 stitches. Perfect tension. Perfect placement. She released the clamp. Checked for leaks. None. Trachea next, Sarah said. The fragment had created a small tear in Torres's windpipe. She repaired it with careful stitching, then checked his breathing sounds with a stethoscope. Clear. Equal bilaterally. Perfect. He's stable, Sarah announced. Vitals are good. Oxygen saturation climbing. He's going to be fine. The OR erupted in quiet applause. Sarah stepped back from the table, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the procedure was draining away, leaving her shaky and light-headed. Commander Okafor was staring at her with undisguised amazement. That was... I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've never seen anything like that. Your precision. Your calmness. You were operating on tissue that some surgeons wouldn't even attempt to approach. Sarah stripped off her gloves. I had a good teacher. And a lot of practice. Who was your teacher? Sergeant Major James Doc Rodriguez. MARSOC's senior medical instructor. He died in San Jin. During the attack. Okafor's expression softened. I'm sorry. So am I. Sarah looked at Torres's sleeping face, peaceful now, his breathing easy and regular. But he taught me that every patient deserves our absolute best. No excuses. No shortcuts. Just skill and determination and the refusal to quit. He'd be proud of you. Sarah didn't know how to respond to that. So she didn't. She simply nodded and left the OR. In the scrub room, she found Master Sergeant Brennan waiting. He handed her a cup of coffee. Sergeant Torres is going to make it, he asked. Yes. Full recovery expected. Because of you. Sarah sipped the coffee. It was terrible, military coffee always was, but it was exactly what she needed. Because of a team. Commander Okafor. The anesthesiologist. The nurses. Everyone did their part. You're being modest. No. I'm being accurate. Sarah set down the coffee cup. What happens now? Now. Brennan smiled slightly. Now you get officially recalled to active duty. Now your medical discharge gets reviewed by people who actually understand PTSD. Now you get offered a position as senior medical instructor at the Special Operations Medical Training Center. Now you stop hiding and start being who you really are. Sarah felt tears starting to form. She blinked them back. I don't know if I can do that. Be that person again. You just did. For the last hour, you were exactly that person. The ghost. The legend. The medic who saves lives when no one else can. But the PTSD is real, is serious, and will be treated by professionals who understand combat trauma. Brennan's voice was firm. But it doesn't define you. It doesn't erase what you're capable of. It's just a wound, like any other. And wounds heal. Sarah looked at her hands. They were trembling again now that the surgery was over. But she understood now that the trembling wasn't weakness. It was proof she'd survived something that should have destroyed her. It was her body's way of remembering and processing and healing. What about County General? She asked. I'm suspended. I violated protocols. That's being handled. Commander Reeves made some calls. Turns out the hospital is very interested in having you back, properly credentialed this time, with full surgical privileges. They're offering you a position as trauma attending. I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than half their surgical staff. And between your military service and your successful completion of advanced medical training, you have more than enough credentials for a civilian medical license. It's just a matter of paperwork. Sarah's head was spinning. Everything was happening so fast. Hours ago, she'd been a suspended nurse carrying her belongings in a cardboard box. Now she was being offered positions, credentials, a future. I need time to think about all this, she said. Take all the time you need. But Sergeant Torres is going to wake up in a few hours, and he's going to want to see you. So maybe stick around at least until then. Sarah nodded slowly. I can do that. 3 days later, Sarah found herself back at County General Hospital. Not as a suspended employee, but as a visitor. She'd been summoned politely by Patricia Hendricks, the hospital administrator. The same conference room. The same severe furniture. But a very different atmosphere. This time, the room held more people. Patricia Hendricks. Commander Nancy Okafor, in her Navy uniform. A man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as the hospital's legal counsel. And Dr. Preston Sterling, looking significantly less confident than the last time they'd met. Ms. Martinez, or should I say Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell? Hendricks began. Thank you for coming. Just Sarah is fine, ma'am. Sarah, then. Hendricks gestured to Commander Okafor. Commander Okafor has been kind enough to explain your unique situation. Your service record. Your qualifications. The circumstances of your medical discharge. Sarah waited. She'd learned in the Marines that sometimes the best response was silence. We owe you an apology, Hendricks continued. We treated you unfairly. We didn't understand who you were or what you were capable of. And we punished you for saving a life. Ma'am, I did violate protocol. You did what was necessary with the resources available. That's not a violation. That's good medicine. Hendricks slid a folder across the table. We'd like to offer you a position as trauma attending physician. Full surgical privileges. Competitive salary. And a formal apology for how you were treated during your employment here. Sarah picked up the folder, skimmed it. The offer was generous. Extremely generous. More money than she'd ever made. Better hours. Actual respect. This is contingent on completing the medical licensing process, the lawyer interjected. But given your qualifications and your military training, that should be straightforward. Sarah looked at Dr. Sterling. He was staring at his hands, his face flushed. Dr. Sterling? Do you have anything to add? He looked up, met her eyes for the first time. I was wrong about you. Completely wrong. And I'm sorry. You're not just a good nurse. You're probably a better surgeon than I'll ever be. And I let my ego and my prejudice blind me to that. It was as close to a genuine apology as Sarah had ever heard from someone like Sterling. She nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. So, Hendricks prompted. Will you accept the position? Sarah thought about it. The offer was good. The job would be challenging. She'd be helping people, using her skills, making a difference. But it wasn't where she belonged. I appreciate the offer, ma'am. Truly. But I've accepted another position. Hendricks looked surprised. Where? MARSOC Special Operations Medical Training Center. Senior instructor position. I'll be training the next generation of combat medics. Commander Okafor smiled. That's perfect for you. It feels right, Sarah agreed. For 3 years, I've been running from who I was. Trying to be someone smaller, quieter, safer. But that's not me. It never was. I'm a Marine. I'm a combat medic. And the best way I can honor the people who didn't come home is to make sure the next generation is as prepared as possible. Hendricks nodded slowly. I understand. And for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Thank you, ma'am. As Sarah stood to leave, Sterling spoke again. Martinez, Sarah. One question. How did you stay so calm? During the surgery on Commander Reeves. You were doing a procedure that most surgeons would be terrified to attempt, and you were completely steady. No fear. No doubt. How? Sarah considered the question. Because I've seen fear. Real fear. The kind where enemy rounds are snapping past your head and the only thing between a dying Marine and the afterlife is your hands and your training and your willingness to not give up. Compared to that? A quiet ER bay with good lighting and clean equipment. She shrugged. That's easy. She left the conference room and walked through the emergency department one last time. The nurses watched her pass, their expressions ranging from awe to confusion to respect. None of them were mocking anymore. Outside, a military vehicle was waiting. Master Sergeant Brennan was leaning against it, scrolling through his phone. How'd it go? He asked. I turned them down. Good. Because Colonel Sharp wants to meet with you this afternoon. Something about redesigning the entire MARSOC medical training curriculum with your input. Sarah laughed. Of course he does. They drove to Camp Pendleton in comfortable silence. Sarah watched the California landscape roll past, feeling more at peace than she had in 3 years. The trembling in her hands had lessened. The flashbacks were less frequent. The nightmares were starting to fade. She wasn't cured. PTSD didn't work that way. But she was healing. Finally. At the Special Operations Medical Training Center, Colonel Sharp was waiting. He was a lean, hard-looking man in his 50s with gray hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too much combat. Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell. He shook her hand firmly. Or should I call you Doc? Just Sarah works, sir. Sarah, then. Sharp gestured to his office. Let's talk about your new position. They spent 2 hours discussing training protocols, curriculum updates, and the specific challenges of preparing medics for modern combat. Sarah found herself opening up, sharing experiences and insights she'd kept bottled up for years. You know, Sharp said at one point, you're the 4th Sanjin ghost we've located. The other 3 are also working in training roles now. We're thinking about bringing all of you together. Creating an advanced trauma course taught by people who've actually done it. Sarah felt a spark of excitement. That could work. If we're careful about PTSD triggers and make sure everyone has proper support. That's why we'd have you leading it. You understand both the medicine and the psychology. As the meeting wrapped up, Sharp leaned back in his chair. One more thing. Commander Reeves requested permission to visit. He's recovering well, by the way. Says he wants to thank you properly. That's not necessary, sir. He insists. Says a Marine saved his life, and he wants to acknowledge that face to face. Sarah nodded. All right. Send him through. Commander Reeves arrived 10 minutes later, walking with a slight limp but otherwise looking healthy. His face lit up when he saw Sarah. Document. He extended his hand. I owe you my life. You don't owe me anything, sir. I was just doing my job. Bullshit. Excuse my language, but bullshit. You went above and beyond. You put your career at risk. You revealed yourself when you'd spent 3 years hiding. Reeves's voice was intense. That takes courage. Real courage. The kind that doesn't happen in a firefight, but in quiet moments when you have to choose between staying safe and doing what's right. Sarah felt her throat tighten. Sir. Let me finish. Reeves pulled a small box from his pocket. This belonged to my grandfather. He was a Marine in Vietnam. Medic, like you. He gave it to me before he died, told me to give it to someone who reminded me of why the Corps matters. Why honor and courage and commitment aren't just words on a poster. He opened the box. Inside was a combat medic badge, tarnished with age but still beautiful. I want you to have it, Reeves said. You remind me of him. And you remind me of what we're fighting for. Not just in combat, but here at home. The idea that we take care of each other. That we don't leave anyone behind. That being strong means using that strength to protect others. Sarah took the badge with trembling hands. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Say you'll keep doing what you do. Say you'll train the next generation to be as good as you are. Reeves smiled. And maybe say you'll stop hiding. Because the world needs more people like you, not fewer. Sarah pinned the badge to her shirt. I'll do my best, sir. That's all any of us can do. Epilogue. 6 months later. The Special Operations Medical Training Center classroom held 30 students, all Marines, all specially selected for advanced medical training. They ranged in age from 22 to 35. Every one of them had already completed basic combat medic training. Now they were here for the advanced course. The one that would prepare them for the worst situations imaginable. At the front of the room stood Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Mitchell. She wore her uniform with pride now. The trembling in her hands was gone. The nightmares had faded to occasional bad dreams. She wasn't hiding anymore. Good morning, she said, her voice clear and strong. Welcome to Advanced Combat Trauma Medicine. I'm Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell. Some of you might have heard stories about me. Some of those stories are true. Most are exaggerated. All of them are irrelevant. She paused, looking at each student in turn. What matters is this. For the next 12 weeks, I'm going to teach you how to save lives under impossible circumstances. I'm going to teach you how to operate in chaos. I'm going to teach you that can't is not a word we use when a Marine is dying. She rolled up her left sleeve, exposing the tattoo and the scars around it. I got this in Sanjin, Afghanistan. January 2018. The worst night of my life. 19 Marines wounded. For dead before I could reach them. I operated for 12 straight hours while the base was being overrun. I saved most of them. Not all. Just most. The students were hanging on every word. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. You will face impossible situations. You will have to make terrible choices. You will lose patience despite your best efforts. And you will carry those losses with you for the rest of your life. She paused. But you will also save lives. You will do things that seem impossible. You will be the difference between a Gold Star family and a Marine coming home. And that makes everything, all the training, all the stress, all the pain, worth it. Sarah picked up a medical mannequin, placed it on the demonstration table. Now let's get started. Today's lesson, arterial hemorrhage control in a combat environment. Pay attention. Your future patients are depending on it. As she began the demonstration, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in the window, a Marine in uniform, teaching, serving, living. Not hiding. Not running. Not pretending to be someone smaller. Just being exactly who she was meant to be. The ghost had found her way home.